Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast episode. Our podcast is driven by Ridge Rock Hunt Company, and I will talk more about them at the conclusion of our episode. I'm Sam. I'm one of your podcast hosts. Appreciate you guys tuning in. On this week with one of our Midwestern pro staffers, Mr. Michael Tepe. Welcome back to the podcast, man.
Hey, man, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, always good to get on here and chat with our Fall Obsession staff, and I think this is actually my first podcast to have with you. You've been on here a couple times before, once with Drew, and then we turned your couch chat from a while back into a podcast, which was pretty cool, but my first time to sit down and talk with you, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, me too, yep.
So I wanted to dive in and talk to you. We always like to keep our content on our podcast, relevant to the season as best we can, everything. And, this year, I think I mentioned last week in our episode that this year has just been a killer year for our staff. And you are no exception to that either. I know earlier in the year you laid down a nice buck and you just put down a second nice buck. Was it this morning or...
Yeah. Actually, this morning, we're recording this podcast on November 11th.
Yeah.
And laid down the first one on an evening hunt on the 3rd of November. And so, 8 days apart. Obviously, you guys seen the video of the reduction zone doe back in the mid-September. And that was so I could actually earn my reduction zone buck tag, which is what I harvested on November 3rd. Yeah.
Gotcha. So that we'll start there with that buck, because that buck, he looked very unique. He had some splits in some of his tines and everything. He was a very cool looking deer. Lots of character is what it looked like to me from the photos. Had you been watching that buck, or was it just out of the blue?
Yeah, actually, I had been watching that buck. I passed him up last year. There was a really nice deer that I was in there after that I had a couple years worth of experience with. Actually have one of his one of his sides of his sheds from 2020. That one side, I should remember this now. I want to say that one side was 80 some inches.
Wow.
He was a big one. I was guessing him at 5 at least at that time in 2020. Then I hunted him last year. Never got to lay eyes on this guy. Had daylight photos of him, but so I passed up this guy that I harvested last year, just because I was all in on that big one, and I was okay with eating a tag if that's what it meant. And as luck would have it, I didn't get an opportunity at that big one. So this one, I passed him up last year, started running cameras on that property the first week of July this year, and wouldn't you know it, the very first card pull, this buck shows up. And at first I didn't recognize him because of, like you're saying, he has a lot of character. It was pretty easy to nickname him Muley, with those split G2s on both sides matching. It wasn't until I got a couple more pictures of him that I realized that he was the buck I passed the year before. And the only reason I knew that was because he had an injury in between his shoulder blades and his spine. And he was missing about a 10 or 12 inch circle of hide. I mean, all it was just, there was no hair whatsoever, no fur there whatsoever. It was just exposed completely. And so once I got the pictures on this year, I'm like, that's got to be him. What other deer would that be?
Right.
And he grew quite a bit from last year. The year before, he was just a clean, symmetrical 8. This year, he, like I said, he put on those splits, mainframe 8, and then he also had a scoreable sticker off his right base. So he ended up with 11 scoreable points. And this deer was the biggest deer I had on the property from July 1st till I harvested him. I ran cameras. I had 4 cameras on a small reduction zone property, hoping and praying that big one from the year before made it. To my knowledge, I haven't heard anybody killing them, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right. Yeah, of course. Well, certainly a very impressive deer. Now, I assume when he walked out, it's a no-brainer at this point. You're trying to get it done. So,
Yeah, I went in there specifically to harvest that deer.
gotcha.
Like I said, I had waited as long as I thought needed to be waited to find out if that other one was going to come in. Showed some of my buddies and local guys here some pictures, and they all thought I was crazy for waiting. But then I showed them what was in there last year, and they're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I went in there specifically for him. I should have had that buck on camera. That should have been a filmed hunt. Try to make a long story short, I had the camera arms set up and everything ready to go. Got in there, 3.5 hours before dark, and I got an email from the insurance company, and we're going through new insurance. And so they say, hey, can you call? So I'm using my phone this year to record the videos, especially with bow hunting. It's so up close and personal.
Right.
You don't need that great zoom. And so I make some phone calls, end up calling my wife, asking her to look for some documentation so we can give it to the insurance company. And wouldn't you know it, my wife's sitting there telling me about her day. It's 4:45 in the afternoon, 70 degrees in November. And in this area, that's not good when the average temperature is 50 for that time of year.
Right.
And I'm on the phone with my wife, and I look over, and there he is at 36 yards. And I'm like, okay. And I literally don't even tell my wife. She's still on the phone talking. I put the phone in my pocket. I've been in the stand since 4. My release is not even on.
Oh, man.
I dig into my coat pocket, pull my release out, put my release on. It's the kind that you have to push in and twist
Yeah.
to get it to tighten on. And I put that thing on as fast as I put that thing on there so fast. Now, granted, there was some wind blowing all the oak leaves around in the tree I was in, so he never heard me. But from the time I put my phone in the pocket until the time that sucker had an arrow in him, I'm thinking maybe 1 minute.
Yeah. It happens fast.
Yeah. And I got on him as soon as possible, got the release on, hit him with the rangefinder. He was sitting there at 36 yards behind a branch, and he steps out into my food plot. And if you watch the reduction zone doe hunt, you'll see the food plot that I'm talking about. Steps into the food plot, and I range him at 32 yards. I come to full draw. He steps towards me and quarters to me just a hair. I ended up center punching him right on the outside of the shoulder blade, hit both lungs, top of the heart, and he made it maybe 100 yards.
Wow.
And I got a really cool picture on my cell camera of him standing in the food plot and me in the background in the tree facing him with my bow in my hand.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it turned out awesome. I couldn't believe he came out that early.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, he's out here this early. I was trying to contemplate in that 1 minute from putting my phone up to shooting him. Can I pull my phone out, hang up with my wife, put it on the camera arm, and get this on film? That's how bad I wanted to get on film. And I said, there's no way.
Yeah.
I just don't see this happening. So I just, I went ahead and did what most guys would have done at that point and shot him.
Man, that's the struggle of self-filming and everything. I think I mentioned in last week's podcast with my dad that I felt like a horrible producer on Texas Dirt this past week because I had a similar experience with a cull buck coming out in earlier than I expected, and I don't have a cool element of being on the phone with somebody, when he walks out or anything like that. I was looking the other direction out the window, and I turn and look, and boom, there he is, 20 yards, just cruising, and just left to right, cruising in front of me, and I'm scrambling to get camera and reaching for bow and try not to get busted and all that kind of stuff, and I got a small snippet of him in a video as he's walking out of the frame. That's about all I got of him. But yeah,
Okay.
I know the struggle.
Well, I mean, how bad do you want to get it on film? Do you want it to potentially cost you to the deer?
Yeah. And
And I'm not at that point yet, so
yeah, yeah, that was the other thing. It wasn't like it was a monster either. He's a big bodied deer, but he was he was a cull buck. So I was trying to make that decision in my mind. In Texas we have this antler restriction rule where the inside spread has to be so wide and stuff. So I'm trying to figure out if he's a legal deer also, and just in that short period of time, bow, trying to figure out what he is, camera, all that kind of stuff. I got a small snippet of video to show for it, and that's about it. So,
Jeez, yeah.
But I know the feeling. So it all happens fast for you.
Yep.
Buck runs 100 yards. Is it just like, are you just sitting back like, what just happened at this point?
Well, so right after I shoot him, I see the arrow hit with the lighted knock. I watch him run off about 80 yards, and then I knew he couldn't have went much further than that. And I pull my phone out of my pocket, and my wife is still telling me. Because, see, as any husband out there knows, you make the fatal mistake when you ask your wife, well, what did the kids do today to make you so upset? Because that's not a 30-second conversation.
Nope, it is not.
It's as long as you'll allow it to last, basically. And so I pull my phone out, and I'm like, honey, I just shot a big buck. And I'm jacked up. I'm super jacked up. And she's like, no, you didn't. No way. No, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, I did. I literally just put my phone in the pocket and just shot this buck. And it was just, oh, that was awesome. And that's when you start sending the text messages out and the phone calls. And, for me, the last 10 years of my, hunting career, I've been fortunate enough, knock on wood, that I've been able to keep the buck fever in check before the shot. It's after the shot that I get tore up.
Yep.
And where it was the first 10 or 15 years of my hunting career was the exact opposite. Getting all tore up before you get the shot. Most of the time you don't end up getting the deer then because you screw it up. But yeah, that's what I live for as a whitetail hunter, is those moments after that adrenaline rush. I don't know how you could ever duplicate that doing anything else in life, at least not me.
It never gets old.
No, it doesn't. It don't really matter what it is, buck, doe, but yeah, when it is a nice buck and it's one you got history with, you're just that much more excited.
Yeah. Man, the buck fever is one thing, having that settle in. You're right, it's indescribable. You can't compare anything to it, in my opinion. And then just, after your nerves do settle, you just the feeling of, accomplishment, I guess, that, you did what you were out there to do, that following that is just, it's a tremendous feeling for sure. So
yeah. And I would say that particular deer, that was that feeling times 10, because that was the deer that I went in there for. And I felt pretty decent about my chances on laying eyes on him. Like I said, been running cell cameras out there and some non-cell cameras for the last several months. And he was by far the most visible buck on the property. Not only was he the best buck, but he was by far the most visible one. So I figured there was a chance, being the rut, as long as he hadn't been locked down with a doe yet, that he'd be on his feet. And obviously that was the case, being on his feet. He was on his feet like, I probably shot him 2.5 hours before dark on a 70-degree day.
Yeah.
That's all. I tell guys all the time, don't overthink it. I've overthought it before. Oh, it's hot out, it's windy out. If it's the rut and you can find time to get in a tree, because you never know when that guy's going to be going from a doe to another doe, or still looking for his first doe, depending on what stage you are in the rut. And man, they don't care. They've been waiting 11 months out of the year for that.
Yep.
You think they're going to care if it's a little warm out?
Yeah, exactly. So y'all started seeing rut activity very beginning of November then.
Before
Before.
here in southern Michigan, northern Indiana, where I've done the majority of my hunting, I usually look for the 2 days before Halloween, that 28th, 29th of October. That's when it can really get fired up. I actually had a hunt behind my house this year on the 29th of October. Had a perfect east wind, which we don't get a lot of east winds. And I mean, I had a top 5 hunt of my life when I didn't actually kill a buck. I saw 14 slick heads and 4 bucks, 2 shooters on 8.5 acres.
Wow.
Here in southern Michigan. I mean, it don't get no better than that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't get a chance to harvest one, but man, I watched between the 4 bucks, I seen 2 of them chasing does. One of them was tending to a doe. One of the shooters was, and I watched 8 scrapes be made and 1 rub.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, I mean, about that time of year around here, especially with a cold front coming in, it's on fire. You better be in the woods from, for me, I like I said, about 28th, 29th of October, from there until, I would say Thanksgiving, but really more importantly until about the 15th of November here when gun opener in Michigan. If you can get in a tree, you got to get in the tree.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, I would love for our rut to be that early, but we're still waiting for it down here. So
yeah, you got what, December probably before the rut really gets fired up?
Typically mid-November, and my dad and I were out there this last week, and it was warm, which made for a long 5 days of hunting. But we talked to some other guys in the area. Like, we went into town one afternoon to get some supplies and stuff, and just at the Walmart there was just this other random guy that just started talking to us because we were wearing camo, and he was talking about how he was seeing rut activity and just some conversations like that made it seem like it was about to kick in. We never witnessed any ourselves. Starting today actually is when the cold front hit and the weather really turned, so I'm excited to see what my spy points send these next couple days, because I imagine we're going to start seeing some rut activity here. Normally we get a mid-November rut, and then a second wave, a second rut kind of early December. It seems like what we normally see down here. So
yeah, I would say about the first week in December is usually when we'll see secondary rut here in the Midwest from those unbred does from that first phase.
Yeah.
I just think there's too many of them going into heat at once. They can't all be bred.
Yeah. We're seeing more does this year, so hopefully that's the case for us. Because last year it was very strange. We were very buck heavy last year, and like with young deer. So I'd never seen a property quite like it with that many young bucks on it. But this year we definitely have more does on the place, so that's encouraging from a management standpoint, in my opinion. So
yeah. Well, and if you don't, you got to have some does to bring them guys in when it's time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to hold back on my mature buck tag at least until this first rut comes through, before I slap my tag on a more of a Cole style mature buck, I guess you could say, because there's this one that I'd kill either way. He's only a 6-point, but he's got about 20-inch inside spread. He's a stud little 6-point, and I'd love to shoot that thing just cause. But needless to say, last year the rut brought in some deer that we hadn't seen before, and I'm hoping that it does that again this year. So I'm trying to be patient and wait for that at least. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, at least in your area, the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
So you kind of hate to burn your tag up, and then your spy points start going off, and you're like, oh man.
Yep, exactly.
I've been there before. It's been years, but I've been there. You're like, oh crap.
Yep.
I should have held out, but I mean, to each their own.
Yeah, for sure. So first buck tags punched, but then take us all the way as recent as this morning on the day that we're recording here, and you notched another buck tag. Tell us a little bit about that hunt and that experience.
Yeah. Well, a little backstory here. So I own my own company. I own a lawn care company, and so I can maneuver my schedule around somewhat there.
Yeah.
And right now we're into the leaf cleanup season, and it's it's pretty hectic because it's basically right during prime time and everybody wants their leaves cleaned up. But I have been maneuvering my schedule around a little bit more this year than in past years, and I've just been focusing really hard on the morning hunts here in the Midwest. Like I said, you get into that time frame of the end of October, first 2 weeks of November, and I notice personally anyways, the morning activity is considerably better from a buck standpoint, just being on their feet for more hours during the day in the morning, cruising, trying to find that doe in the morning. And so since the 29th of October, I've only missed 3 morning hunts. And one of them was because it was super hot and windy. The other 2 was because of work. And you get to that grind where it's just every single day you're getting up, that alarm clock's going off. And after a while of not seeing anything, you start second guessing, was this the right idea to get up today and go hunting when, I could be at work making money. And same thing happened this morning. That alarm went off, and I almost slept in. I tried talking myself into sleep, man. And I just said, nope, just get out there. You just never know. And I went into a property here. This tag was actually in Michigan. And went into a property that I just got access to last year in December. And so this property is new to me. I'm learning on the fly. And I've been hunting the north side of the woods all, on and off so far this year. I think I've spent 5 sits on the north side of the woods. Well, I went 2 days ago and checked my camera on the south side of the woods. And lo and behold, I have had 2 different shooters in there in daylight within the last few days. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go into that south side of the woods because I got the right wind for it. And sure enough, I get in there this morning, actually bumped one out getting in, which that always, sucks when you got one blowing at you walking in. But got in there early, and we had a bright full moon condition here. And about 30 minutes before daylight, I see a couple deer come from across the road from the south. Pull the binos up. Turns out to be a couple of yearling bucks, and they're playing with each other, sparring. Well, I'm watching them for about 10 minutes, and all of a sudden they perk up, and they're looking across the road but closer to me. And I pull the binos up, and at this point it's about 20 minutes before legal light. And sure enough, I see pretty good sized body. I'm like, okay, that looks like that could be a nice buck. Well, the 2 small bucks go over and try and check this doe out that he's got, and he runs them off. And immediately I'm like, okay, it's got to be a buck, but it's just dark enough I can't see good enough. But I can tell by his behavior it's got to be a buck. So he runs these 2 small bucks on and off for about 15 minutes. Finally, runs these bucks off. And in the meantime, it's getting lighter, and I finally get a chance to look at him, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a definite shooter. If I get an opportunity at this deer, I'm definitely going to take it. And finally, 5 minutes before the legal shooting light, the doe starts coming across the field about 200 yards away, starts coming right for the tree, gets to about 150 yards, and I'm like, okay, this may happen. I grab my bow. I start ranging possible spots where I can get a shot. And in the meantime, the last of the 2 small bucks goes by at 70 yards through an opening, and I'm going, oh, Lord, I hope they don't go by on that path because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And sure enough, she just keeps coming real slow, taking her time, and he's just pacing back and forth behind her. It's like he is just so worked up. He don't want to be out there any more than he has to. I think he was afraid of being too close to that road because the whole time they were hanging out before daylight, they were maybe 50 to 100 yards off of that dirt road. I mean, we didn't see any cars, but at the same time, I think he wanted to get her off of that road and get her pushed into some cover. And as they were getting closer, I'm taking my bow and I'm going from this side of the tree to this side of the tree. And I'm in a great big cottonwood that goes into 3 trunks, great big cottonwood. And I have to take my bow and go around this way. Oh, they're coming on this side of the tree. oh, nope, she's going on this side of the tree. And I do that like 4 different times. And I'm like, Jesus, hopefully he don't see me. And finally, she's coming right at the tree, and she turns and goes on what would have been my right side of the tree. So I move again, and she starts cutting. And I'm like, this is the worst case scenario. If they would have went down the other side of the tree, I'm going to get multiple shot opportunities and most likely close shot opportunities. Well, lo and behold, she turns. Well, my neighbors to the west of me there have standing corn. And I'm like, you know what? They're going to be going into that corn. And if they get into that corn, I don't know if they're going to come back around and give me a shot. They could be in, I may never see them again. Yeah. So I range her at 30 yards. She's in a perfect hole. I'm like, okay, the problem is he is beyond her. So I put a rangefinder on him. He's at 45 yards in an opening. And I'm like, it's now or never at this point. I'm either going to take this shot or I'm just going to take a chance on whether or not they come back through. And I practice religiously at 80 and 100 yards just so that I can be more accurate at 40 and 50 and 30.
Yep.
And so I said, I got this. So I turned the dial to 45, come to full draw, and wouldn't you know it, my CBE side stabilizer bar is pushing me out off of the tree. I can't get up against the tree as close as I want to get because that sidebar is actually kind of pushing me off a little bit. And I kind of chuckled in my head at the moment because I was like, well, I've never had this happen. But then again, I've never had a sidebar happen. You know? Well, he's standing there at 45 yards, and I know there's one more hole at 45 yards. He's just got to take a couple steps. So I'm at full draw. I'm on him. He comes into that next opening. It was super calm and quiet this morning. So I just real lightly ran at him, and he slowly stopped and looked up at me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go for the heart. It's a little bit longer shot, and I think he's just going to duck because I alerted him.
Yeah.
So I aim bottom third for the heart, and I shoot, and I never see him duck, and it just sounds like I hit a tree. Just pow, and he hits the ground right then.
No kidding.
Hits the ground, gets up, and starts trying to run off for about 10 yards, and I notice his opposite leg is broke. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't shoot him on that side. And I'm like, holy crap, that went through the one side and broke his opposite leg at 45 yards. And this dude ended up bulldozing himself to go 90 yards from where I shot him and expired.
Wow.
I mean, his front left leg just gave out because it was broke. And I hit him in the front right leg, down in the bottom third, below the shoulder blade itself. And I was so impressed at 45 yards to have that just blow right through there and just break that opposite leg like that. And it ended up slicing the top of his heart and hitting both lungs.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better shot, but he didn't even duck on me. I thought, oh, man, he's going to duck for sure. And nope, he didn't duck at all.
Wow. So I have to ask, after hearing that, what kind of arrow have you built? What do you run?
Yeah, so I like to shoot heavier poundage bow. First of all, I'm shooting a 74-pound bow. I'm actually looking at getting maybe a different bow next year so I can get closer to possibly 80.
Yeah.
I'm shooting 420 grain Carbon Express Maximum Reds.
Okay.
And I'm on the end, I've got 100 grain 4-bladed Grim Reaper.
Gotcha.
And yeah, it's a deadly combination. I'm actually, part of why I want to get up in my poundage is I want to get up in my arrow weight. Years ago, I used to be in that high threes, 380, 390. I've bumped myself up to the 420. I really want to try and get closer to 440 to 450 because I want to have the same hunting setup out here for when I go out to Colorado and I mule deer hunt or I elk hunt or a black bear hunt. And so that's, honestly, for whitetail around here, I don't need a heavier arrow, but I don't want to change setups either.
Yeah, man, I've been running a 435 grain Easton Axis for, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 seasons now, and like
Mhm.
the arrow that I shot my management buck with the other morning, that's the 4th deer I think I've killed with that arrow in particular.
Oh wow.
Just I mean, shot placement is one thing that contributes
Yep.
to pass throughs, but I wait for a good shot opportunity. I take a good shot. I get a pass through. Arrow blows right through them. I'm out of that elite. I'm shooting 300 feet per second flat with that thing,
Hmm.
and it blows right through them. And you might have to repair a fletching every now and then, fix it up, and you're good to go for another one. Like I'm a firm believer of that. You know, 400, even closer to 500 grain arrow. I know we just built Nick Powell out a new arrow setup, and his is right at 500 grains. So it's just
Nice.
I become a huge fan of that kind of arrow build. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Because the first year I went out elk hunting back in 2015, man, I was green. I went out there with a 379 grain arrow. And those guys out west are like, what in the world? I'm like, well, I'm shooting 320 feet per second. They're like, that don't mean nothing.
Yeah, and yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, I got a little reality check. I mean, I didn't actually shoot anything to learn the hard way, but yeah, after doing more research, figured out that hey, I need a minimum of 400, to even think about going out after big game like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of come on a similar journey because used to be when I first got into archery, it was always light as I can go. I shot a carbon bow, way back when. I shot, like, I think it was the first carbon bow that Hoyt back then, ever came out with. Like, I had to have it, lightweight bow, lightweight arrows, all this speed, all this stuff. And now I'm like, no, my bow's probably on the heavier side of mid range, just for the in hand weight, and then a heavier arrow. Crank that thing all the way down as far as it'll go, and money, love it.
Yeah, that's like my setup this year. As you well know, I bought that CBE front and side rear stabilizer kit, and I've never ran a back bar. And man, it adds some weight. But let me tell you something. I love drawing that bow back, and my bubble on my sight is already 3/4 of the way leveled out.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is just the tiniest movement. Where before, I was lucky if 1/4 of the bubble was in there.
Yeah. Man, like, so before I shot CBE, I shot another manufacturer that makes a very heavyweight sight and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing carried over to the CBE sight that I run with the slider and everything. But with those heavy sights, I was having the same problem. I was like, man, I don't feel like my bow is sitting right in my hand. It's not well balanced. I'm struggling to get settled and stuff. And I too had never run a back bar, and several years ago, I started running that back bar, just an 8-inch with a couple ounces out front. And oh my word, it made a huge difference. I loved it. I'm never going back.
No, because I was always one of them guys, like, I'm going out west. I'm hiking every year. I've been trying to go out west almost every single year since 2015. And man, you're hiking 6 to 15 miles a day. And why do I want this extra weight? And I haven't taken it out west because I just got it this year, but there's no doubt in my mind it'll be on there next year when I make my trip out west.
Yeah, man, I had my bow rigged up in 2019. I think that was the first year I ran that back bar. And I had my elite ritual that I had that year rigged up with it and everything. And we went on that pronghorn hunt for a week in Montana, and just hiking and on foot the whole week and everything. And it was never an issue, never a concern, never a thought for me at all. So
yeah, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, it helps too. Like you were saying, you practice long distance, which I love to hear that because, I haven't hunted in Montana or anywhere out west since that hunt in 2019. So, everybody's like, well, why do you practice so far away? If you're just hunting whitetail here in Texas, are you really going to take an 80-yard shot on a deer? I'm like, no, I'm not going to take an 80-yard shot on a deer. But exactly what you said earlier, it makes those 40 and 50-yard possibilities extremely doable, and a lot more comfortable doing it. So
yeah, Yeah, outside of when I'm out west, I haven't taken the last time I took a shot probably over 35 yards would have been back in 2019 when I killed my biggest buck, and that was a 41-yard shot, and I 12 ringed him. And it's just one of those deals where, man, if I know I'm going out west like I am next year, I will rarely ever step inside of 80 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, I will just stay between 80 and 120 and just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. And man, when I come like this year, I knew I wasn't going out west. So most of my shots I'd say were at 80, but I did shoot at 90 and some at 100. But man, even I'd shoot at 60 yards and I almost had to tell myself to concentrate because it starts getting, dare I say, easy. Because you have to focus so hard on hitting it at 80 to 120 yards. Man, everything has to be lined up for that to be where you want it. I mean, you do anything wrong and it's magnified tenfold. And man, when I'd move up inside anything inside of 60, it's like I'd have to actually kind of remind myself to go through all my steps and make sure before I'd squeeze the trigger, because it almost just felt easy, like back in the day when I would shoot out to 60 and then 20 and 30 felt easy.
Right. Yeah, no, exact same thing. I'll shoot 20 or 30, to either warm up or, just kind of get back in the hang of things. But then I definitely try to stretch out and just challenge myself, not from a, I don't want to sound like it's coming from an arrogance or a pride standpoint or anything like that, but just I want to be the best I can be with a bow in my hand, especially since I, for the most part, exclusively bow hunt. So,
Yep.
I want to make sure that when I take these 20 and 30-yard shots on animals that there is no room for error. There's no doubt in my mind that I can make that shot, and that's, shooting out that far makes that possible. And then it also prepares you for out west. So
Yeah, no, if I hadn't been practicing this year at the distances that I had, there's no way I'd have had the confidence to turn that dial to 45 this morning. I'm shooting a single pin sight, and dial it down to the exact yardage. And if I hadn't been practicing, there's no way I would have never even thought about taking that shot. And instead it was just like, well, this is the shot. This is the shot that I've got. It's within my killing distance, and it worked out, and I smoked him, hit him right where I was aiming. But yeah, at the same time, I don't strive to take 45-yard shots at white-tailed deer by no means.
No, it was a situation, the opportunity purely. So, and good on you, man. And I must say with that buck too, I love deer with character. I love the splits, like your first deer this year and everything. But, and this is just me personally, I love just clean 8s and 10s. Like that is my bread and butter. If I had to draw on a piece of paper my dream deer, it would be a clean 8 or a clean 10 probably. And I saw your picture this morning of that buck, and I was like, oh my word, that is. Yeah. I was far more excited for you, for that buck than I was even your first one. Probably too because it was your second mature deer in a short period of time too. So that's very rewarding. But.
And he's actually bigger than the first one. He's actually bigger antlered and bigger bodied.
Awesome. He looked bigger bodied. I was trying to compare.
Yeah, he is bigger, and he had all that. He's got all that bark just tore up in his bases where he's been rubbing. Some of it was still green, like he just rubbed this morning. And I love that. I love that, man. That was just, I'm new to fall obsession, obviously, as of this year. And last year, I know I said a little bit about it in the post that I did on my first buck. Last year, I didn't kill a buck. And it was, it sucked. But, it's not like everybody kills a buck every year.
Oh, yeah.
But I got a little, got a little spoiled, got a little lucky there, having gone 12 years without not killing a buck, and then being fortunate enough to kill some nice deer in that span too. And man, this year I was ultra motivated, ultra focused to not let that happen again this year. And it led to a lot of time in the seat, but I also kind of saved up some time with the wife. I told her, I said, I'm not going to hunt real hard in early October when a lot of other guys are hitting hard, because I've learned over the years that if I don't have just endless amounts of time, which I don't anymore, owning a small business, having a wife, having 3 kids.
Yeah.
I need to be more efficient with the time that I can spend in the woods. And so the last couple of years, I feel like I've been kind of circling, like I told you, that 28th of October until, Thanksgiving, but more importantly, till the 15th of November, those 18 days or whatever it ends up being, I got to get in the woods as much as possible during that span. And obviously this year it proved to pay off.
Absolutely. Well, man, that is awesome. It's always cool to get somebody on here with a recent success story. You might be the first person on the podcast that killed a deer the morning of us podcasting, but
That's awesome.
to have 2 success stories, like I said, and this early in the season is really awesome on 2 mature bucks. But it also doesn't end there, because I didn't even know if we were going to get to record tonight, because then right after you go and knock down nice buck, your wife hit the woods this evening.
Yeah. She went behind the house this evening, and I've been holding her off on shooting does. It's the rut. And obviously, if you go shooting all your does, what's going to bring them bucks in? But, she's a newer hunter, and she doesn't have the experience that some of us that have been doing it for a long time have. And I told her, I said, you know what? Just whatever you want to shoot, just try not to shoot a button buck.
Yeah.
But anything else, I really don't care. Just, you need to get some more kills under your belt, because, she's been on the struggle bus the last 2 seasons when it comes to archery. And the first 4 years, she shot 1 doe every year and found it right away, quick, clean shots. And in the last 2 years, she's made a couple bad shots and wasn't able to retrieve the game. Luckily, we had proof that both of them actually lived. We actually did get trail cameras to confirm both situations. So that's obviously a blessing. But she's been getting real hard on herself, just getting down on herself. And so to her go out tonight, make a 31-yard shot on a nice mature doe behind the house with her compound bow, man, I was tickled pink for her. She was super excited. She watched it go down. So there wasn't even a question on whether or not she'd made a good shot.
Yeah.
Watched it go down, said, I mean, it might have went 80 yards. So that's why we were able to make this happen. We just drove the tractor right to it, put it in the bucket, came up, gutted it, took a shower, and here we are on the podcast. So
Came right into it. Yeah, I was texting you. I was like, hey, man, if we got to move it tomorrow night, that's fine, because, you're sending pictures to the group text and everything, and everybody's excited. I'm excited too, and I'm thinking, man, he's not going to have time to record tonight. He's going to be busy cutting that deer up.
Yeah, I got a butcher shop in my own garage, and so I've got everything I need to butcher.
Yeah.
So my buck is already skinned, quartered, and hung in a cooler. I got a cooler big enough that you could get at least 2, maybe 3 deer in there.
Awesome.
And so once we're done with this podcast, we'll get that one skinned, quartered, and in that cooler.
Perfect. Yeah, this is my first year, just 100% every deer with everything, doing all of my own processing and everything. So I'm new stepping into that. I don't have a cooler that you can hang deer in, so I have to be a little. What's that?
You can't hang like a full deer. You have to quarter it.
Yeah. Well, I don't have.
Man, this thing's worth it.
Yeah, I don't have that luxury just yet, so I have to make do with what I got and be a little quicker on the draw. But it's a humbling yet rewarding experience doing your own processing and everything, and I'm enjoying learning that for sure. So
well, the prices in this area have doubled. Well, I mean, everything's doubled. Let's be honest, but the prices on whitetail processing here in our area has doubled. And I've been processing my own for years, long before, even when it was like $60 to get one process, I was doing it.
Right.
And it's just, I like knowing how it was processed, how the meat was taken care of. and it just makes me feel a little better when I'm able to harvest that deer and put it all the way onto the table, and I know every single step that went into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and that's definitely what I'm discovering and learning. That was a factor for us was the cost, because before I had my career that I have now as a firefighter, I worked at, we have an archery shop and wild game processor down here that we're partnered with called Cinnamon Creek, and
Yep.
really good folks, and I work there in both the archery shop and then later on the wild game processor. So I was very comfortable taking my deer there, and I know that they do good work and do a good job, but just the cost and everything was the big driving factor for us this year. My wife and I were like, you know what, this is where we're gonna try to save some money this fall, and we're gonna bite the bullet and do it all ourselves finally, like we've been talking about doing for years. So we finally committed to it, and yeah, it's made for some long evenings, but I don't mind.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Well, it's rewarding when those packages go into the freezer.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually just bought a new freezer yesterday because my old chest freezer went out. So we have 2 freezers in our garage, so I was putting all my meat in my wife's in her freezer. And and I literally, after that buck I shot the other morning, I had no more room. Like my area of that freezer was stuffed to the gills full of venison, and I'm like, all right, we got to go buy that freezer. So we went and bought it, and it's like everything meat wise just went into that thing this morning. It's already halfway full with meat, and that was rewarding too, being like, okay, I have quite a bit of meat in my freezer, that's some of it's stuff that we bought and stuff over time and just to stock up, but then half of that meat in there's deer meat that I've cut up myself, so it's pretty awesome.
Well, and to take it to another step, when it comes to the future generations, we really enjoy the fact that our kids will actually get out there. My son, who is now 5, he's been running a knife, an actual knife, not a butter knife, an actual knife since he was 3, helping me process deer.
Wow.
And even our oldest daughter that's 8, she will come out from time to time and help run a knife or the grinder or the vacuum sealer. Or a lot of times what she'll do is she'll help her mom when she cans a whole bunch of meat. So it's just, man, it's like bringing this whole thing full circle. You put all this work into the off season, and you're doing everything you can to be successful in the fall. And then when you are successful, then you're including the kids. And we had the kids out there this morning helping me retrieve my buck, even though I watched it go down. Heck, our oldest was 5 minutes late to school because she wanted to come see it. But who cares about those 5 minutes? That was way more important.
Yeah.
And then, tonight the wife shoots that doe, man. I got the kids ready. She told me I started getting them all bundled up. It's only in the 40s here now. We're getting another cold front coming in, and she jumps on the quad. I jump on the tractor and take the whole family back with the lights and get the pictures. I mean, I couldn't draw up a better life for what I want than what we're currently living here. And we're just blessed, man. Just so blessed.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, man. Being able to include family in it and everything, that's very important, very special for sure. Like I know, what was it? I guess it was 2 evenings ago now, maybe. Trying to remember what day it is. 2 evenings ago, I think, that I was processing that deer, and my son, who's 4, was out there, and he was asking me all sorts of questions, and he just sat there at the table in a chair. I might need to wait one more year before I give him a knife. but he was just sitting there for a very long time, just watching me, asking questions, asking about the meat, asking what I was doing. He was very, very interested. He's very interested in hunting and everything already at his age. So it's awesome to see that coming along. So
yeah, and that's where it's got to start, man. You got to. He's interested. That's all that matters. I mean, that feels so good as a dad, having your son or your daughter interested in what you are passionate about. And, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be an avid hunter like you one day, but it's a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. No, good friend of mine named Chester Barnes, he always he always said it a very, very good way. He said, my kids, when they grow up, he said they might never choose to hunt. And if they don't, that's fine. He goes, but I'm going to make sure that they know how. And
There you go.
I thought about that. I was like, man, that's a really good way to put it. The passion will come along as it may, but at least they will know how to do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, because my boy, he's our middle child. We got an 8, a 5, and a 2, and he has been very interested for a couple years now, and he's tagged along with me for a handful of hunts. He's actually been along for 2 successful doe harvests, and man, he gets fired up, and I feel pretty confident that he's going to want to hunt. But our oldest daughter, she is actually starting to show some interest now. She's going to be 9 here in just a few months, and she hasn't really shown much interest, but she actually went with her mom behind the house here the other night and was all kinds of excited because they saw a buck chasing some does, and, she was, Mom, shoot one, but, she didn't get an opportunity, and she was kind of bummed that she didn't, but at the same time, she come to the house all excited to tell me about it, and we're not used to that with her. So, our approach has been, we don't want to push on them to be hunters, but we want to include them in the hunt.
yeah,
Whether that's the retrieve of the game, whether that's the processing of the game, the canning, the butchering, planting food plots. My boy goes with me almost every time to help throw the seeds out. We can always tell where he threw them. There's patches of 400 seeds growing in one spot. You can tell Arrow planted that patch over there. But, it's so rewarding.
yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So you mentioned, kind of segue into another thing I want to talk to you about before we wrap up our time. You mentioned your food plots and stuff, and I know you had some content in our off-season series, and then kind of leading into that reduction zone kill that you've referenced a few times as well, about your property and some of the management tactics and stuff that you've done out there. How's all that paying off? How are things looking at this point now that we are actually into the season?
Yeah. I would say pretty good. Between my wife and I, we have harvested, I've harvested the 2 bucks, and then I harvested that doe in the reduction zone, and then she just harvested a doe tonight. So we've harvested 4 deer, 2 bucks, 2 does. 3 of 4 were shot on one of the food plots.
Awesome.
Or on a food plot that I planted. The doe she shot tonight was on the food plot here behind the house that you've seen some content from, where I planted some screening.
Yeah.
And got the brassicas mostly in there with another blend of some peas and some beans and some oats. And that's where she shot that doe tonight. And I would say, it's really paid off. Here behind the house, all the management work that I've been doing, whether it's planting switchgrass, maintaining switchgrass with fires, hinge cutting, TSI with taking down forked trees or leaners, trying to open up that canopy, introducing a water hole to a dry area. Our whole property's dry. The closest water is one neighbor has a pond, but it's right up by the road. Other than that, you got to go 3/4 to a mile in any direction to find actual water source. And so, we introduced some water holes, food plots, like we said, and then just creating travel corridors through all of it to try and locate or have the deer go through where we want them to. And it's made a huge difference. And in 2020, 3 years combined, I saw 1 buck that I wanted to shoot, and I shot him in 2020. Now this year, I've already seen 2 with my own eyes, and I have as many as 5 on camera that are big enough that I'd like to harvest. And I didn't have a single buck last year that I wanted to harvest, and I'd like to think that some of it has to do with all this hard work that we're putting in.
Yeah, for sure. You got my gears grinding for sure on some stuff that we can do out at our place that we're working on. It's a work in progress for us. But what so when you talk about opening up the canopy, or I guess more talking about the creating travel corridors. We'll focus on that real quick here. What kind of brush makes up y'all's the thickness to where you're creating those paths, and or piggybacking off of that? What do you look for when you're trying to figure out where to place one of those travel corridors?
Well, first of all, on our property, just because we're limited on size, I focus around the best spots to hang my stands. And the reason I go off a best spot to hang my stand, first and foremost, is access. Can I get in? Can I get out clean? Mm-hmm. If I cannot get out and get in clean, I don't put a stand there unless it's a rut only. I'm going in on a day that I feel is 50-50. I'm going to get a shooter in here because I know I might blow it up afterwards.
Right.
And I do have one set like that on our property, and it is back in my sanctuary where I normally don't go. And that's where I saw the 2 shooters on the 29th of October, and actually got out without blowing any deer out. So was very fortunate. But number one for me is access. I preach access so much. If I cannot get into a spot clean, I won't hunt it. It's not worth it to me. I don't think it's worth it to me to blow out all these deer and educate all these deer. So first of all, I will pick a spot where I can get in and out. And then once I've located that, that's when I will try and make my travel corridor around that tree for a certain wind. So here, on the way our property sets up, I'm looking for west winds blowing to the east. Just about any west wind, preferably a northwest wind or a straight west. And then also I try and set up for north winds, because in our area, I've noticed if you either got a west or northwest wind or a straight north, usually equals good deer hunting. That usually includes a cold front of some sort. So I'll try and set my travel corridors up so I can access in from the east into my stands. And then once the wind is blowing, I'm not trying to set the deer up to get in an area where they're going to get downwind to me.
Yeah.
In this area here, we've got a mixed hardwoods of maple, oak, and cherry. That's the main 3 that make up our property and in this area in general. You'll find a few walnuts and a few hickories, but for the most part, it's maple, oak, and cherry. And so I had the woods logged out in 2019, because when we first bought this property in June of 2019 is when we closed on it. I could literally look through for 150 yards in June, and it looked like a park. There's no deer going to want to stay in this. They're just going to want to move through it. I told my wife, I said, this is as thick as it's going to get the entire year. It's June. Everything's green. There's leaves everywhere. And I can stand here at eye level, and I can see 150 yards through the woods. That's not going to cut. And so I had the property logged down August of that year, and instantly put side cover down with leaving all the tops. And it went from being able to see 150 yards to being able to see 50 at most. And so then that next winter I came in and I cut some more trees down that the loggers didn't want because they weren't big enough. And I took some more of those out because I wanted to get an 80-20 canopy. I wanted to have 80% of my canopy opened up in the areas that I wanted to be thick for sanctuary.
Yeah.
And I wanted 20% standing. And so that's what I strived for. And I'm pretty close to that for the most part. But now, 3 years later, it has gotten so thick that in the summertime, in June, mind you, when you're not hunting, but when it's at its thickest, 10 yards maybe.
Wow.
I can see. And now, right now, 100% leaves are gone here in the Midwest. I can see, if I'm on the ground, I can see maybe 50 yards at most.
Yeah.
And that's good because considering what I had to what I'm at now, we are actually seeing deer bedding on the ground. Like I said, we only own 8.5 acres here behind the house, and we're seeing anywhere between 5 and 10 deer standing up in the bedding areas and working their way out. That they weren't there before. There wasn't any cover for them, and so I'm going through in these areas that are starting to get super thick. I'm getting a lot of briar regeneration. I'm getting a lot of new tree growth regeneration. Some grasses starting to grow up, and I'm going through with my tractor and my chainsaw, and I'm cutting at most ATV wide travel corridors. At most, that's the widest ones. Most of them are 2.5, 3 feet wide, and just enough that a deer feels comfortable going through them, but also big enough that they don't feel trapped.
Right.
And I'm trying to give these deer multiple shoots. They can go this way, they can go that way once they go down these travel corridors, so they're not like feeling like they're enclosed. They got to feel like they have escape routes.
Right.
So that's what we're working on here. You know, we're planting evergreens for pine trees for future cover, and for winter cover. Once they get mature, they can be underneath them when we get heavy snows. We're planting switchgrass, and we're doing whatever we can to make it as thick as we can.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm always curious, always to ask, whether it's on the podcast or just in conversation, what other folks are doing, because I feel like I'm always taking bits and pieces of, our environment down here obviously is different than yours, but I try to take bits and pieces from what these other folks are doing, because we're on a long-term property, year 2 of a long-term property down here, and we're trying to make it better every season, obviously. So always curious to learn in that standpoint. So,
well, and I would say, I know you spoke earlier this year. I remember having a conversation with you about food plotting there in Texas and the droughts that you guys had. And basically between time management and droughts, it just didn't happen this year. And I know you were talking, hey, I want to try and make this happen next year. I will say that there's only one property that I currently hunt that doesn't have food plot system on it. And that's just because it's not possible there. It's just all ag and tree rows. But man, if I got private property ground with the kind of rich soil we've got out here and the weather we've got, there's no way I'm not going to have food plots, because they're just so vital. As long as you don't overhunt them, it can completely change your season around here, because you're offering them something they don't have.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. Well, I feel like, man, I could sit on here and talk with you about hunting probably for several more hours and not get tired of it. But I know we're getting longer into our time here, and I know you still, as you mentioned, still got to go work on a deer a little bit this evening. So I figure we'll take it to closing here, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast in the very near future at some point. I got plenty of ideas for some upcoming episodes about management and or archery and that kind of stuff, and would love to get you back on here for those when the time comes. So, but I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you coming on now, and especially not just on short notice, but after such a long day, putting some deer down and making time for podcasts. I appreciate it.
Yeah, days like today, you're wired. I mean, it's gonna be hard to fall asleep tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the feeling for sure. Absolutely. Well, for our listeners, thank you all for listening. If you guys have not already, hit that follow and subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. We're on all major podcast platforms, as well as YouTube and Carbon TV, Waypoint TV. We're on those platforms as well, so be sure you go check us out on there. fallobsession.com, that's our website, that's the hub. That's where you guys can go to find all of our educational and different types of hunting and outdoor content. All of our video series are on there, gear reviews, educational videos, and articles. I know Michael's written a couple articles for us on as well that are on there that are very informative, relevant to his area, like all of our staff writing pieces that are relevant to areas that they and you hunt. So head on over to our website, explore around, and I'm sure that you'll find something that fits your bill on there. Social media, all the major platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as Go Wild. Make sure that you follow Fall Obsession. We're actually right now running our second annual veteran hunt giveaway. We're giving away a hunt to a former or active duty service member down here in Texas. We did this last year, and our privilege that our hunt host is letting us do it again this year. So head on over to our website or our social media pages. It's all over those places. So if you are a veteran or you know somebody who is that would benefit from this hunt, you can go to our website and nominate them, and there's more information on the hunt on there. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is the podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi, they do a fantastic job, not just supporting Fall Obsession, but taking care of their clients, obviously, with Ridge Rock and booking hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. If you're looking for that next experience, or maybe even your bucket list experience, and you want to book with a vetted, trusted outfitter, give Derek a call. He'll work with you on your timeline, your budget, all that good stuff. After one conversation, he's the kind of guy that you'll feel like you know forever. So be sure that you head on over there and give him a call and give Ridge Rock a chance to book your next adventure. Michael, thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, for our listeners, we'll be back again next week, as always, for another Fall Obsession podcast episode, and we will catch you then.